All right, let's look at the next one. Jay Towels, is the current way we do church services prescribed in the Bible? Where did this current style of worship come from? That's a great question. There isn't really a way of doing church services clearly laid out in Scripture. There's only elements in a church service. So you can look at like Acts. A lot of people look at Acts 2:42 as kind of showing some of these elements. So this is after the first like influx of all these people getting saved. What were they doing? What were the first church services like? They continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine. So we could call that like in the teaching of the New Testament, because that's where we find the apostles' doctrine, and fellowship. So they're gathering together, not just in a building, but actually connecting with each other, like as part of the family of God, in the breaking of bread, which is probably talking about communion. Well, here's the debate. Is it about communion or is it about having meals together? And I think the two were joined at this time in the church. I think they were doing communion meals. Just like when Jesus did communion the first time, there was a whole meal and there was an aspect of it that was communion. So they were doing communion and in prayers. And some translations say the prayers. So let me give you ESV. I'll bet it says the prayers. Yeah, the prayers. Because they think that this may have been some sort of corporate group specific kinds of praying that was going on. So there we go. We'd have scripture, teaching of scripture. We'd have fellowship. We'd have communion, at minimum, possibly a meal and communion, and we have prayer. So like, what does that give you as far as the church service? Okay, I don't have worship in there, do I? Yeah, well, that would be included in prayers, I think, because prayer is partly an aspect of. If you read the scriptures, prayer is often an avenue for worship. And the Psalms themselves, even though they were set to music, are actually prayers. So I think that includes worship. But does this mean like you're supposed to have, 5 songs and then you have announcements and then you have like a 40-minute sermon, maybe 30, maybe an hour if you're, if you're depending on whatever your church is set up does. Then you have like, time afterwards where you just have people hopefully mingling and fellowshipping. And is that an okay expression? Well, I mean, yeah, like here's my thought. If the Bible doesn't give us exactly this order, but just gives us elements, then maybe we just need to include the elements and not worry too much about the order. That would be my thought. So is the current way we do church services prescribed in the Bible? There's elements I think we want to see in our church services and a lot of flexibility I want to give to different churches on how they do those things, because the Bible doesn't make it ironclad. Because here's the temptation I have personally. I'm very used to a certain thing and I go somewhere and they do it different and I don't like it. That's human. And the older you get, the more you're like this. That's a human thing. Recognize my personal discomfort with what's new is not the same as saying that someone's doing something wrong. So allow churches this, wide range of abilities to do these different things in their services. That would be my take on it for what it's worth.